It's the All Things Strange podcast. I am your host, Agent Anderson. Come along as we examine UFO sightings, conspiracies, and all things strange. You can find all of our wonderful links in the description on the Linktree, where you can find our Discord, our Patreon, our merchandise, and more. This week's episode, Auditory Illusions. Every episode I release is in the mono format. Oh, I guess before we get started, I might as well plug my Patreon. We've got two wonderful tiers for you. The first tier coming in at a measly $3 a month. And the second tier, $5. For the first tier, you get after hours, bonus episodes, and early access. For the second tier, you get to vote on upcoming topics such as this one. This time around, our Patreon subscribers voted for Auditory Illusions, so that's what we're doing. You can find the link for the Patreon in the description on the Linktree. Maybe I should start posting a separate link for that. I don't know. All right, anyways, here we go. Every episode I release is in mono format. That means instead of having a left-right stereo channel, there's just one channel that you hear the same in both ears. Today, for the first time ever, the All Things Strange podcast is releasing a stereo episode. Some of these illusions require stereo. So mono means that you hear the same thing in both ears, if you're wearing headphones, of course. For spoken voice, like this show, you don't really need stereo. You have double the file size. You have a left track and a right track, so you literally have twice the data, twice the file size, with no real benefit. You don't really need to hear different things in both ears for a spoken voice. If you had 4 people talking, you could place them in different positions in the stereo field, but in general, it's not worth it for the file size trade-off. That kind of thing is generally only worthwhile if you have a bunch of people talking at the same time. If they're coming from different directions, it makes it a little easier to tell who's saying what. But it's easier just to wait your turn to talk. Just don't talk over people, and you don't really need to double the file size. With stereo, you can move the sound left and right, and even up and down. You can get some really cool spatial effects. Check out some Pink Floyd with headphones, for instance. They do a lot of really cool stuff with the stereo field. Well, let's get right to it. I recommend highly that you listen to this episode using headphones for the best experience. Some of these illusions will not work without using headphones. Or, I guess they do work if you're using stereo speakers, but you have to be positioned in what they call the sweet spots. You have to be a certain distance away from the speakers, and you have to be exactly in the middle between the speakers. It's easier to just wear headphones. First up, a shout out to Diana Deutsch, DiannaDeutsch, who has done a lot of research in this area. She has published books and articles on the topic if you want to find out more. She has a great website with in-depth explanations and sound samples. She also has 2 CDs which can be found online. Phantom Words and Other Curiosities, the second being Musical Illusions and Paradoxes. I actually have Musical Illusions and Paradoxes. I found it at a thrift store and I bought it because it looked interesting. I didn't really know a whole lot about the topic. And this was years ago. And ever since, I've been wanting to do an episode on auditory illusions. I just haven't gotten around to it yet because as You know, if you've listened to this show before, I have quite a few topics on my list and very little time to get to all of them. Here's a definition from Wikipedia. I'm sure everybody understands what an auditory illusion is, but here's a good definition just to kind of illustrate it, I guess. Auditory illusions are illusions of real sound or outside stimulus. These false perceptions are the equivalent of an optical illusion. The listener hears either sounds which are not present in the stimulus, or sounds that should not be possible given the circumstance on how they were created. Humans are fairly susceptible to illusions, despite an innate ability to process complex stimuli. Confirmation bias is believed to be largely responsible for the inaccurate judgments that people make when evaluating information, given that humans typically interpret and recall information that appeals to their own biases. Amongst these misrepresentations, known as illusions, falls the category of auditory illusions. The brain uses multiple senses simultaneously to process information. Spatial information is processed with greater detail and accuracy in vision than in hearing. Auditory illusions highlight areas where the human ear and brain, as organic survival tools, differentiate from perfect audio receptors. This shows that it is possible for a human being to hear something that is not there and be able to react to the sound they supposedly heard. When someone is experiencing an auditory illusion, their brain is falsely interpreting its surroundings and distorting their perception of the world around them. And of course, we're aiming to do that on purpose today. Before we get started with our examples, if you're curious about the science behind it, there's been a lot of research done. Everything from how you determine what direction a sound is coming to why your brain processes something a certain way. All of that is extremely interesting, but it's a little far beyond the scope of what I was hoping to achieve with this episode. However, it is fascinating material, so if you are curious, check it out. There are lots of articles available to you online, and it's really cool stuff. Well, let's get started. First up, the Doppler effect. This is not, I don't know that I would consider this a true auditory illusion, because there's actually something physical going on to change the sound, but I wanted to start everybody off with something familiar, maybe ease you in gently to the topic. I've talked about this one before, but here's the definition for those unfamiliar. The Doppler effect, also Doppler shift, is the change in frequency or, equivalently, the period of a wave in relation to an observer who is moving relative to the source of the wave. It is named after the physicist Christian Doppler, who described the phenomenon in 1842. A common example of Doppler shift is the change of pitch heard when a vehicle approaches and recedes from an observer. Compared to the emitted sound, the received sound has a higher pitch during the approach, identical at the instant of passing by, and lower pitch during the recession. Or in layman's terms, let's say you're standing still and a sound source, such as a car or a train, is moving towards you. The sound waves, as they travel towards you, kind of get smashed together, making them seem to have a higher frequency and thus pitch. And of course, as they move away from you, they become more stretched out and lower pitch. That's kind of basically what we're talking about here. Here's an example of the Doppler effect. I have an audio plugin that mimics this effect. It's really fun to play around with. You can use it on sounds that aren't typically associated with the Doppler effect, such as the spoken voice. It's really fun to play around with. You can use it on sounds that aren't typically associated with the Doppler effect. Next, we have the Haas effect, Haas. The Wikipedia definition is the precedence effect, or the law of the first wavefront, is a binaural psychoacoustical effect concerning sound reflection and the perception of echoes. When two versions of the same sound presented are separated by a sufficiently short time delay below the listener's echo threshold, listeners perceive a single auditory event. Its perceived spatial location is dominated by the location of the first arriving sound, the first wavefront. The lagging sound does also affect the perceived location. However, its effect is mostly suppressed by the first arriving sound. The Haas effect was described in 1949 by Helmut Haas in his PhD thesis. The term Haas effect is often loosely taken to include the precedent effect which underlies it. So this one's really cool. It uses the difference in what you hear in each ear. If I take something like, let's say, my spoken word, and add a 50 millisecond or 100 millisecond delay, then you perceive an echo. But if the delay is much smaller, say like 20 milliseconds or 30 milliseconds, then instead you hear both audio events as a single source. The result is that the audio sounds kind of like it's surrounding you. Here's an example of me noodling around on my G&L L2000 bass. Unfortunately, I cannot play a well-known song, perhaps something by the band UFO, because of copyright. So I'm just going to play some basic chords, I think. So what I'll do is I'll play the raw source audio, just the audio by itself, and then I'll play it with a short delay so you can hear the Haas effect. Next, we have my personal favorite one on this list. This one's really cool. It's called Shepherd tones. A shepherd tone, named after Roger Shepherd, is a sound consisting of a superposition of sine waves separated by octaves. When played with the bass pitch of the tone moving upward or downward, it is referred to as the shepherd's scale. This creates the auditory illusion of a tone that seems to continually ascend or descend in pitch, yet which ultimately gets no higher or lower. This is often compared to a barber's pole, an optical illusion that always appears to move up or down. It works because as the pitch gets higher or lower, the volume of that tone is lowered so that you don't perceive it going away. You layer a bunch of different tones so that only the ones in the middle are the loudest, and the further away from the middle in pitch it gets, the quieter it gets, so that as you layer them, you don't really hear the ones getting higher and higher and fading away. It just sounds like it keeps going up or down forever. There are several variations on this idea, such as the Shepherd Risset glissando. Jean-Claude Risset, or I guess you would say Risset, because it's like a French name, Jean-Claude Risset, subsequently created a version of the scale where the tones glide continuously, and it is appropriately called the continuous Risset scale or Shepherd Risset glissando. When done correctly, the tone appears to rise or fall continuously in pitch, yet return to its starting note. Risset has also created a similar effect with rhythm, in which tempo seems to increase or decrease endlessly. That one kind of blew my mind when I heard it. I hadn't heard that one before doing this episode. Another one called the tritone paradox, which is related, and it uses shepherd tones. The tritone paradox is an auditory illusion in which a sequentially played pair of shepherd tones separated by an interval of a tritone or half octave, is heard as ascending by some people and descending by others. Different populations tend to favor one of a limited set of different spots around the chromatic circle as central to the set of higher tones. And this one is weird. Because the shepherd tones are more than a single tone, it's not just one note, it's like layered notes. It's kind of like when you play the tritones, you play one note after the other. The notes are kind of moving up and down at the same time. Not really, but that's sort of like a layperson's explanation. But whichever direction it's moving, certain people will perceive that the tone is moving up, others perceive that the tone is moving down. Research indicates that culture, which notes are used, and even the native language or region of the listener can all have an effect on whether they perceive the notes going up or down. So it's not across the board. It's pretty interesting. So here are some examples. Here is an example of just a shepherd tone. Here's a shepherd scale example. Here is an example of the shepherd glissando. This is an example of Risset's accelerating rhythm. And this one, I tried a little experiment. So I was listening to it, and it seems like it keeps going faster and faster and faster. And when you listen to it, you can't really hear the change happening. At least I couldn't without trying. I don't know. I wasn't really trying. But I did an experiment where when I was listening to it, I took my headphones off and put them back on, and it seemed like it started from the beginning, like it sounded slower again. It was really weird. So you might try that as well while you're listening to this. Here is an example for the tritone paradox. Remember, this is the one where some people hear it going up, some people hear it going down. In this example, this is the music cue I use for the bonus episodes. If you've heard the bonus episodes, this is what I play at the beginning instead of the music that I use for the regular episodes. You can hear that I've used a shepherd glissando layered with other sounds to sort of create a soundscape. I had a specific image in mind when I wrote this, a particular scenario, shall we say. While I play this, close your eyes and listen. See if the sounds bring any images or scenarios to your mind. I'll reveal what I was imagining when I wrote this later on in the after hours. This was a really fun project. I did all of this in a sequencer, in a DAW, digital audio workstation. Same thing I use for editing the podcast, just with music stuff instead. I had a lot of fun making this. Well, here it is. Next up, we've got binaural beats. A binaural beat is an auditory illusion that can occur when two sine waves of different frequencies are presented to a listener dichotically, one in each ear. For example, if a 530 Hz pure tone is presented to a subject's right ear, while a 520 Hz pure tone is presented to the subject's left ear, the listener will hear beating at a rate of 10 Hz, just as if the two tones were presented monoraily, but the beating will also have an element of lateral motion. So the idea here, without all the fancy words, if you've ever heard two different sound sources, and I'll play an example of this when I get to it, but when you have two different sound waves, they interfere with each other constructively and destructively. So let's say you have two sine waves and you line them up. If they're exactly the same thing, when you have something getting loud, or let's say, imagine a sine wave, right? That's how it's graphed. If you line up the two sine waves, if they line up, then they'll double each other. It'll make it louder. But if you offset them or put them out of phase, they'll cancel each other out. And you can actually do this with a stereo system. Put something on your stereo, and this has to be in a room without a lot of reverberations, otherwise it probably won't work. But I've actually done this before. I've tested it, and it absolutely works. If you go to one of your speakers, if you have those speakers that have the wires going into the back and they just have like those clippy things, go to one of the speakers, reverse the clippy things, sit in the middle of your two speakers, and if you sit in exactly the right spot, the sound will be completely canceled out. It's really weird. It works better with a pure tone than it does with music, but the point is that the sound waves interfere with each other. Now, if you have a tone, like in the example of the definition, a tone that's say 530 Hertz and 520 Hertz, they will physically interfere with each other, meaning that the sound you hear is being changed by those two sound waves combining and messing with each other. But the really weird thing here is that if you play each sound independently in each of your ears, you can still hear the what they call beats, or like a warbling sound that you get when you combine the two pitches. So when you combine the two pitches, it physically changes them, but when you do it separate in your ears, it does not physically change them, but somehow your brain still interprets the difference between them and you still hear the warbling sound. It's really weird. So binaural beats have been used in music and for therapy. They're all over the place if you look for them, but you generally need headphones to enjoy them. A lot of times you'll see, if you look up a binaural beats video on YouTube, you'll find like lots of meditation type stuff. Some say that they can cause brainwave entrainment, which that appears to be true, but I'm not an expert on that. But that's a whole other topic. That's a whole other topic anyways. We won't really get into that. Look it up for yourself and try it out. It's kind of fun. Anyways, here's an example. In this example, I will play one tone, then the other, then both mixed together in the middle so that you're hearing what they would sound like if they're mixed together. Well, they are mixed together, so not if what they would, but what they do sound like when they're mixed together. Then I'll play each separately again, this time one of them panned to the left or in your left ear, then one to the right, and then both at the same time. And you should hear a similar effect even though the sounds are no longer mixed. And some people report hearing not just the warbling sound of the beats or the interference between the two sound waves, but also an element of motion. Like they might perceive that the sounds are moving left and right. I'm not messing with the pan knobs, I promise. If you hear that, that's just your brain interpreting things. Our next audio illusion, auditory illusion, is called the constant spectrum melody. Because of the way your ears and brain receive and process sound, you can sometimes hear a static sound as if it were moving, or as if there is a melody. There isn't, it's just static sound. This one's really cool. Here's an audio example of the constant spectrum melody. And just as a warning, some of these are based on the perception, well, they're all based on the perception of the listener, but some of them, like the Haas effect, I would wager that probably everybody's going to hear that. Some of these examples, not everybody is going to perceive the illusion. So if you don't hear anything weird or you don't hear a melody or something, there's nothing wrong with your speakers or headset. There's nothing wrong with your ears. It's just the way people's brains are wired. Not everybody hears all of these illusions. Next, we have audio pareidolia. I think that's how you say it. Pareidolia. Pareidolia. Anyways, you know when you look at a cloud and you see shapes and things, maybe an elephant or a car or something, that's called pareidolia. Your brain is always attempting to find patterns in things and interpret them, even if they don't exist. Even if it's just random noise, your brain will try to make it into a pattern. I'm sure everybody has experienced this before visually. This happens with sound as well as visual stimuli. Again, not everybody reports hearing anything. Some people report hearing words, voices, or even music. This can happen with any type of noise, such as an air conditioner, a shower in the other room, even wind. We'll try white noise and see if you hear anything. Now, before I play the white noise, make sure that your volume's not too loud. Try to get it to a nice, comfortable level. and see if you hear anything. Because I say that because white noise is a constant noise, and it can be fatiguing to the ear if played for a long time. And I don't know exactly how long I'm going to play it. I think I'm going to play it maybe for 2 minutes. So just close your eyes and make sure you're in a nice quiet place and just listen to the sound of the white noise. See if you hear anything. I promise I'm not putting anything in there. Scout's honor. So if you hear something, it's just your brain interpreting patterns that don't exist. All right, here we go. I might try a fun little experiment here just to see if it makes any difference. I'm going to put white noise in one ear and pink noise in the other ear. Let's see what happens. I don't know, maybe nothing. Probably nothing, but let's try it out. Next, we have the octave illusion. The octave illusion is an auditory illusion discovered by Diana Deutsch in 1973. It is produced when two tones that are an octave apart are repeatedly played in alternation, high-low, through stereo headphones. The same sequence is played to both ears simultaneously. However, when the right ear hears the high tone, the left ear receives the low tone, and conversely. Instead of hearing two alternating pitches, most subjects instead hear a single tone that alternates between ears, while at the same time its pitch alternates between high and low. 86 subjects were tested, and none perceived the tonal pattern correctly. Most subjects heard a single tone that alternated in pitch by an octave as it alternated between ears. When the earphones were reversed, the ear that initially heard the high tone continued to hear the high tone, and the ear that initially heard the low tone continued to hear the low tone. Some subjects only heard a single tone that moved between ears but did not change in pitch, or changed very slightly. Several subjects heard various complex illusions, such as two alternating pitches in one ear and a third pitch that sporadically occurred in the other ear. So this is a cool one. Everybody hears something different. No, you might not hear the same thing as somebody else, but basically we're playing, in one ear we're playing high-low, and then in the other ear we're playing low-high. So you're hearing those at the same time, but they're alternating. And when I listen to it, I hear on my left ear, I hear it low down to the left and then high up to the right. And then if you take off your headphones and switch them around, you should hear the same thing. I mean, that's what I hear. I hear low to the left, high to the right. And if you switch your headphones, you would think it would reverse, but it doesn't. It's really weird. So you can try that with yourself. If you want, switch your headphones around halfway through and see if it changes anything for you. Maybe it does, it might. But I found it interesting that when they did a study on this, out of 86 people, not a single one heard the tones correctly. So here's an example I'll play the illusion, and then I'll play each ear separately so you can hear what's actually going on, and then I'll play the illusion again. Sometimes once you hear what's actually going on, you're able to see, or in this case here, better what's happening. Kind of like if you're playing Where's Waldo, once you see him, you can't unsee him. He's always going to be there for you. All right, here we go, the octave illusion. This next one is pretty cool. It's called Deutsch's scale illusion. It's an auditory illusion in which two series of unconnected notes appear to combine into a single recognizable melody when played simultaneously into the left and right ears of a listener. Here's the audio example. You can hear the audio in one ear and then the other, and then both together. And when you combine them, rather than sounding like disjointed melodies, you hear a single melody. It's pretty cool. Our next illusion is called the illusory continuity of tones. This is the auditory illusion caused when a tone is interrupted for a short time, during which a narrow band of noise is played. This is similar to the blind spot that we all have. I don't know if you guys know it, but you have a blind spot. It's just how your eyes work. But you might not be aware of it because your brain fills in the gap. You can find your blind spot by getting a 3x5 card or a piece of paper, drawing a dot on one side and maybe a plus sign on the other. You could use 2 dots, whatever. You do you. If you're using like a piece of paper or whatever, make them like 5 inches apart. Don't put them too far apart because it might not work. Anyways, close your left eye. Start with the paper at about arm's length. Have the dot on the right-hand side and the plus sign on the left-hand side. Look at the plus sign as you slowly bring the paper towards your face. At some point, the dot will disappear. This is where your blind spot is. Usually your brain fills in the missing information and you don't even notice that you have a blind spot. That's kind of what's going on here, but with audio. So we'll do 2 examples for this one. The first example is just a tone and some noise. The second example is spoken word. For the spoken words, I'll play it a second time without the masking sound effects, so you can hear what's actually going on. The phenomenon is something real and not visionary or fictitious. The phenomenon is something real and not visionary or fictitious. Next, we have illusory discontinuity. This is an auditory illusion in which continuous ongoing sound becomes inaudible during a brief non-masking noise. The illusion is perceived only by some listeners, but not by others, reflecting individual variation in hearing abilities. It has been estimated that among young adults, 24% are susceptible to illusory discontinuity. Discontinuity. The most susceptible listeners describe their sensation in terms of the sound actually containing a physical gap. The illusory discontinuity is strongest when the interrupting sound is short, around 50 milliseconds. Longer sounds elicit weaker illusory discontinuity. This effect may be related to better auditory segregation. Not everybody hears this one, as they said in the definition there. I kind of hear it, I don't know, but for me, this one wasn't like really strong. I definitely heard it, but I didn't feel like there was a physical gap there. Maybe you'll hear it better, maybe you won't hear it at all. But if you don't hear it, don't worry about it. Not everybody does. Here's the example. The next audio illusion is the speech-to-song illusion. This is an auditory illusion discovered by Diana Deutsch in 1995. A spoken phrase is repeated several times without altering it in any way and without providing any context. This repetition causes the phrase to transform perceptually from speech into song. Though mostly notable with languages that are non-tonal, like I think I'm supposed to say tonal there, like English and German, it is possible to happen with tone languages like Thai or Mandarin. And here's an example I'm going to use. I'm going to say the phrase once, and I'm going to copy and paste it. So I'm not saying the phrase multiple times. The reason that's important is because if I said it multiple times, I might alter it to kind of make it sound more like I'm singing it, even if subconsciously. So I'm not changing the phrase. This is the same phrase repeated many times. So if your perception of it changes, you know that the illusion is working for you. Again, this doesn't work for everybody. I must admit that I didn't really hear it all that much. It didn't work really that well on me. I kind of heard it, but not really. I kind of heard how it might sound, but it didn't. Yeah, this one didn't work that good on me. I'm hoping it works better for you, dear listener. Well, here we go. The phenomenon is something real and not visionary or fictitious. The phenomenon is something real and not visionary or fictitious. The phenomenon is something real and not visionary or fictitious. The phenomenon is something real and not visionary or fictitious. The phenomenon is something real and not visionary or fictitious. The phenomenon is something real and not visionary or fictitious. Our next auditory illusion is called Yanny or Laurel. Yanny or Laurel is an auditory illusion that became popular in May 2018, in which a short audio recording of speech can be heard as one of two words. 53% of over 500,000 respondents to a Twitter poll reported hearing a man saying the word Laurel, while 47% of people reported hearing a voice saying the name Yanny. Analysis of the sound frequencies has confirmed that both sets of sounds are present in the mixed recording, but some users focus on the high-frequency sounds in Yanny and cannot seem to hear the lower sounds of the word Laurel. This one's weird, guys. This one's really weird. So here's an audio example. This is just the basic sound clip that has been debated. This one went viral, so maybe you've even heard of it before.
Laurel, Laurel, Laurel.
The New York Times has a really cool webpage on this one. Just Google New York Times Yanny Laurel. It pitch shifts the audio so that at some point you hear one or the other that you didn't notice before. And I guess one explanation for this could be your perception of frequency. So as you get older, for instance, you don't hear high frequencies as well, and that might cause you to hear Laurel rather than Yanny. When I listen to it, I can hear Laurel. I do not hear Yanny, but when I pitch shift it on the New York Times website, I can hear Yanny very clearly. This blew my tiny little mind. Both are present in the audio, as it said above, but you generally only hear one of them. This one's really wild. So go and check out that New York Times website if you want to play around with it. But I'll do an audio example here where I do some pitch shifting of my own of the sample. First, I'm going to pitch shift it down a little bit and then up a little bit. Maybe you'll be able to hear both Yanny and Laurel. I'm not making any other alterations to the sound other than shifting the pitch up or down. Here it is.
Laurel, 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 Laurel.
The next auditory illusion is called the sawtooth habituation effect. I saw this one in a video by Casey Connor on YouTube. He has a series of not just auditory illusions, but also explaining kind of some of the science behind it and how your ear works and stuff like that. He talks about things like bone conduction and things that aren't strictly speaking audio illusions. Pretty cool series. Check it out if you're interested. This reminds me of, I don't know if it's called an optical illusion, but there's this trick you can do where you take a piece of paper that has a single bright color, let's say like a fluorescent yellow. Look at the paper for like 2 minutes, and then look away at a blank piece of paper, or like if your wall is white, look at your wall, whatever. And you'll see that the color has changed. Like if you look at the paper and then you look at your wall, you'll see a square of color on the wall that I don't know for sure, but I'm guessing it's the inverse color of whatever you were looking at, or the complementary color, I should say. I'm guessing. I don't know that's true. All right, where was I? Apologies, I was interrupted by Agent Redacted, who we're working on his car. His car's not doing so well, so we're trying to fix it. Where was I? I don't know. I was talking about the paper and then looking at the wall. So yeah, like if you look at the paper and then you look at the wall or another piece of paper, it messes with your eyes. So the sawtooth habituation effect is similar to that. I don't know exactly how it works physically, but it's kind of like your ear gets used to hearing it. So then when you remove that sound, your ear kind of still hears it, kind of like when you're looking at the paper. Really weird. It's similar to the paper, at least to me, it seems similar. For this audio example, we're going to use a sawtooth wave and white noise. First, I'm going to play the sawtooth wave for a period of time, let's say 30 seconds, and then I'm going to follow it with white noise. And if it works, this one worked on me really well. If it works on you, you'll hear, in the higher frequencies especially of the white noise, you'll hear the white noise kind of moving around a little bit. It's hard to describe, but you'll definitely notice the difference. Before I begin, once again, make sure your audio isn't too loud, because the sawtooth wave of just one note played for 30 seconds can be pretty annoying. And I don't want to damage anybody's ears or annoy anybody. So make sure you're at a comfortable listening level before we get started. However, if it doesn't work, your volume might be too low. So try it again and maybe bump it up just a little bit to see if it works. But again, not too loud. We don't want to give anybody tinnitus on this show. So here we go. First, I'm going to play a white noise sample, followed by the sawtooth wave, and then white noise again. And the reason I'm doing that is just so you can hear the white noise by itself without your ears having been messed with first. And before we get out of here, I have to say an honorable mention to the McGurk effect, MCGURK effect. This one is really, really cool, but it requires a video component. So I can't do it on this show because we're audio only right now. However, there are lots of examples online. It's a lot of fun. I found that the effect sometimes didn't work for me. I think it depends on what words are being used, maybe. I don't know. But it worked sometimes and sometimes it didn't. But when it did work, it was really obvious. So if you look up a video and it doesn't work, try finding a different example to see if the next example will work for you. Try a few different videos if you have the chance. This one's really fun and it's definitely worth looking up. All right, well, that's all I've got for you this time. There are more auditory illusions that I didn't get to this time around, but some of them are difficult for me to do by my little old lonesome. If you're curious to explore more, take a look at Diana Deutsch's webpage for starters. Her web address is Deutsch, DEUTSCH.US. DEUTSCH.UCSD.edu /psychology/pages.php?i=101. An easier way to find it would just be to Google Diana Deutsch and it'll probably come up. Anyways, she's got a ton of information on here. She's got more illusions than I have time to cover today, but there's some really cool stuff. So go ahead and check it out. It's a fun topic that you can spend a lot of time reading about and learning about if you're interested. Anyways, thank you guys so much for listening, and until next time, keep it strange.